longer be the conquerors of nature, and nor can we be its stewards. And anthropogenic climate change brings us face to face with this. We're not used to thinking of ourselves as so fragile, so vulnerable. But at the same time, climate change gives us this sense of our immense power to have brought this issue about. The impacts of human activity are on such a scale that we can no longer see nature as we traditionally have, as this simple, stable, external thing. And it never was. The nice, warm period we've had over the last 10,000 years of human flourishing has been an anomaly. So climate change is not merely an environmental threat. Our visions of ourselves, of humanity, are shifting as dramatically as this issue itself. Whether we choose to act or choose not to, this will impact how we see humanity, what it means to be human, to be a being like you or me. We have been conquerors, we have been stewards, but now we don't quite know where we are. And this begs us to question, what could humanity mean to me, to you, to us, whatever that us is? What would we like to become? How would we like to go down in history? Yet, when we talk about climate change, we don't talk about this. But I think it's important to discuss this because what this calls for is a notion of agency, more nuanced than instrumental reason. A notion of responsibility, more nuanced than accountability, either to nature or for it. And a version of politics with a little more integrity. This is what is needed if we are to achieve significant action on climate change. And so today I want to offer you a challenge, which I live by. And this is about opening space to do things differently, creatively. This is about critique. And this came to me via the intersection of three parallel experiences. That of being a climate scientist, environmentally concerned, aware. That of struggling with anxiety and depression. And that of, at the same time, discovering philosophy as a means of analysing questions in everyday life. Now, I used to feel that being accountable for climate change was a simple ethical imperative for me, for all of us. But the deeper I got into this through my personal studies, through studies more proper, through working out where to get involved, the less impassioned I became. And I wanted to know why. Why I wanted something more than I found in activism, rallies, green capitalism, political initiatives, grassroots lifestyle groups, UN conventions I attended. And I wanted to know why my involvement felt somehow disingenuous. Now, this is in part because there's this real disjunction between what science tells us we must do in order to minimize the likely severe effects associated with high levels of atmospheric CO2 and the basic structures and pressures of everyday life. Imagine, it's winter, you're coming home from work, and, well, I know I should turn the heater on to 18 degrees, but I'm tired and I'm cold, and maybe I put it on 24. And looking around, it seems like some of you identify with this. Maybe you don't turn off your appliances at the power point, or you take the car. We all know these actions are problematic, but we also know that even if we did not do these things, we'd still be involved in greenhouse emissions anytime we use infrastructure, the internet, go to work. There's this real dissonance, and if you care, this cognitive dissonance built into everyday life. It's systemic, it's structural. So what do? We distance ourselves because, well, what can I do in the scheme of things anyway? Real progress on emissions is best achieved by industry and private sector and government. And maybe we feel morally confronted. Yet, people are not morally superior when they are cold, and nor are they happier with nothing. So the real question for me is, how do I live with this dissonance? What can I do with it? And what I want to explore here is another way of looking at this. There's this overwhelming affective side to climate change. And I've come to see parallels between this and my personal experiences of anxiety, the disempowerment, uncertainty, feeling unable to act. And through these parallels, I've discovered that my experience with anxiety and depression gives me pointers on understanding how I relate to climate change. And I think we can learn from this. I think there's useful tips for dealing with anxiety that offer practical insight into climate action. Now, the first thing about clinical anxiety is that nothing is going to help you get out of this if you do not first decide yourself that you actually want to deal with this. So perhaps most importantly, you need to take courage to undertake the kind of reflection and acceptance that's needed. All right, what am I talking about? Take, for example, a situation when you're feeling life isn't great, you just want to stay in bed, you don't want to deal with anything, least of all yourself. You could stay in bed and put it all off till tomorrow, and trust me, I've tried this, I've really tried this, but it doesn't matter what the problem is, it doesn't make it go away, because all of our actions, even inaction, have consequences, whether it be about getting out of bed or about addressing climate change. But neither we ourselves nor our situation is completely within our control. You can't fix everything in one go. And as an individual, confronting climate change involves accepting this and accepting an idea of agency that's a little more nuanced than simply being in control here and not in control there. Because the way we normally think about responsibility as well as accountability is altogether inadequate for thinking about climate change. Anthropogenic climate change presents us with an existential threat for which we are causally responsible, but not as you or I as an individual. This is a distributed responsibility, and it's also a differential responsibility. Geopolitically constructed, so hard to apportion. I can't just point and say, you're accountable, fix it. And nor can we ask individuals personally to shoulder the burdens of the world. So yes, you are responsible, but not in the sense of this modern rational agent, man, master of his own destiny. And this can be threatening to accept. But anxiety also shows us that we have to start by doing something. For me, it was to write just one page, apply for one job, contact just one person each day, and this gives you something to hold on to build on tomorrow. And it gets easier. I mean, this is kind of just common life wisdom. Everyone knows it. We don't always do it, but we know that we need to keep doing stuff because completely receding from all our problems is just as impossible as getting them all fixed overnight. But this is how I've come to grips with how to respond to climate change. By starting with one thing, acknowledging it's not going to fix everything or assuage my guilt in some sense, that this doesn't mean that all is lost. In this way, I can allow myself to be involved, to not withdraw. Because from this point of dissonance where we can't work out what to do, something has to give. I had to do something to change the parameters within which I was operating. I couldn't rationalize my way out. I had to take responsibility for myself and start acting. And I'm not saying I've solved everything, I haven't. But what I am saying is that it's through coming to grips with this sense of contingency, this notion of agency where we're not so tightly in control, that we can come to a sense of power. And we are being called to do so. Because we are no longer conquerors or stewards. We need to revalue our identity. So there's a deeper lesson here too, and that is that we should not be so afraid of questioning what we do. It takes a lot of courage to do this, but it's not wasted effort. Now, when I put it that way, it sounds kind of obvious, so let me put this into context. I'm saying that the existential threat of climate change requires us to contemplate some really quite messy questions. Questions of meaning, of identity, of rationality. And it requires us to contemplate these both individually and collectively if we are to motivate real action, significant, lasting action on this issue. Of course, we don't have to do this. We can stumble along and manage, and we will. We're a very adaptable species. This isn't really a question of our extinction, more of who and how many will die. And it's also not a question of regard for the planet. In the words of celebrated comedian George Carlin, the planet isn't going anywhere. We are. The planet has no regard for us. It will long outlast us. It's been through many, many catastrophic to us events before. But if we want real commitment, we need to choose it. It can't just be something we go along with. Because simply changing your light bulbs is not the solution. Individual action en masse helps, but it's not the answer. And we need more than band-aid solutions or solutions that might be overturned next election. Politics needs to change, and this is a part of the answer. We all know, if you pay any attention to politics at all, that abandoning this he said, she said style of politics makes a massive difference in public engagement, reaching resolutions, discourse, shifting policy and legislation. This is not rocket science, it's simple observation. And for an issue like climate change, we need responses that can withstand the environmental flavour of the month, the political flavour of the week. So at its limit, what I'm talking about is really a quite fundamental shift. This is not just a change in subject matter or topics of discourse, but in mode. Not just what we're talking about, but how we're talking about it, how we are thinking about it. And this is possible, even collectively, because we care. And I know many of us are a bit cynical, but the simple fact that we have this dissonance and we experience it as problematic is, to me, proof that we do care, that we can do this, that there is in some important sense more to us and more to life than is resolvable in some simple model. And besides, if it were that simple, we would have done it already. What this means is that climate change offers us an opportunity to grow, to change, to be creative. There's always change, but it's possible to learn from the past. But for this possibility, this opportunity to exist, this requires a space of contemplation and reflection, else we simply repeat the cycle. So, what can you do? What you can do is not go into stuff blind. This means don't just click on URLs. This is called clicktivism. Don't just wear a wristband that says stop CO2 or end poverty or a t-shirt to support some cause. This is a form of slacktivism. Don't delude yourself that by purchasing some ethical luxury good or making large donations to charity, your responsibility is somehow included in the price. While this might help you sleep at night, we really need to actually face the issue here, because there's still a real question to be asked about whether it's possible to address this adequately with the same kind of thinking that created it. So don't just be a champagne socialist, limousine liberal, bourgeois bohemian. I'm not saying that you can't have stuff and money and still be ethical. You can. Just acknowledge it and acknowledge that you like it. Because it's all very well to say that we don't need money or shouldn't want more stuff, that we should all wear Hessian sacks and eat dirt. But pay attention to the kind of people who tend to say this. Because it's very easy to say that people don't need money or comforts when you either have them or when you need an excuse for why you do not. I'm not trying to tell you what action to take. I'm not asking you to justify yourself to me or to anybody. But you do need to justify yourself to yourself. And if this means that you get involved in climate action, do it. If this means you plant trees, join Doctors Without Borders, stand for a political party, even if this means that you decide that none of it is worth your time, I don't care, so long as you have thought about it. I'm saying that whatever you are doing, you need to think it through for yourself. You don't need to get involved in blame-shifting political or social games. You have the right to avoid this and the capacity to tell the difference. You can make an informed opinion. You have a brain, so use it. Because the answers are by no means clear, especially in terms of climate change. Some, for instance, assume that inaction is a sign of moral bankruptcy for which our kids will hate us. But equally, you could argue that action cannot be taken for reasons of international equality, socio-political reasons, economic ones. And this is also not about withdrawing into a kind of relativism from which no action is possible and we can just keep avoiding. No. This is what it takes to go beyond knee-jerk reactions that just reiterate the same cycles. We need a deeper contemplation and reflection. We need to own up to ourselves in all our courage and all our despair, in our capacity to act as responsible, reasonable, ethical people, in however this means something to us. And so, I have a challenge for you. And my challenge for you is to make critique happen. This is not going to bring about a rational, conflict-free debate or solution, but it will help more people commit to the issue and commit more deeply. Now, I come to this through philosophy, but there are many ways to do this. And so I challenge you to start by reflecting and considering the parameters of the problem, whatever problem you are presented with. Find a place of power for yourself, from yourself. Engage these issues yourself and with the people around you. Open this space for us all to think more laterally, more creatively. This space where we can exercise integrity. Thank you.